They married after an arranged meeting but still feel like strangers. After an accidental drink. They had a spicy night. She took emergency contraceptives. After he found out, he kissed her frantically, pressed her on the bed and said, "Have a baby." Early in the morning, the large room was dimly lit, with clothes scattered all over the floor. Sophia opened her eyes and was momentarily stunned to find herself in an unfamiliar room. This was the guest bedroom, Evan's room. She sat up, rubbing her throbbing temples, trying to recall what had happened last night. Last night, she went out to dinner with a senior and coincidentally ran into Evan. Before she could greet him, Evan had already pulled her back home. They had a huge argument, and in her anger, she grabbed a bottle of white wine and started drinking. Her alcohol tolerance had always been low, one drink and she'd be drunk. So, she had no recollection of what happened afterward. Looking at the messy room, a bad premonition surged in her heart. This bad feeling peaked when she saw the red stain on the bedsheet. She and Evan had consummated their marriage. After being married for over half a year, they had finally slept together. Sophia didn't know how to feel about it. At least, she could finally explain things to the parents of both families. As she was thinking, the bathroom door opened. And Evan, already dressed, walked out expressionlessly. Seeing that she was awake, he paused, then walked out with a darkened face. Sophia smiled bitterly. He still treated her with such disdain. Their union had been an accident, and it was a long story. What bothered Sophia the most was that she had mentioned divorce to Evan several times, but each time it ended with his silence. Thinking of the woman she saw last night, Sophia bit her lip and decided to try again. In the living room, Evan was having breakfast. There was a clean set of utensils opposite him, prepared for Sophia. He was always like this, doing everything so perfectly that no one could find fault with him. Even now, despite his cold attitude, he still prepared breakfast for her. Sophia sighed silently and walked over. "Evan, I want to talk to you." Evan didn't speak, slowly finishing the last bite of his meal, then stood up to leave. Seeing him about to go, Sophia hurriedly grabbed his hand. "Evan, can't you let me finish my words before you leave?" Evan stopped. Sophia knew he was waiting for her to continue. Suppressing the bitterness in her heart, she said, "Last night I saw you with a woman." She took a deep breath. "Let's get a divorce. You two seem quite suitable for each other." As soon as she finished speaking, Evan shook off her hand and left without looking back. This outcome was within Sophia's expectations, so she didn't feel much emotional turmoil. After quietly finishing breakfast, Sophia prepared to go out to buy emergency contraception. She didn't know if they had used protection last night, so the emergency pill was necessary. Just as she stepped out, Mrs. Lancaster called. "Sophia, today is your dad's birthday. You and Evan should come home for dinner tonight." "What? Oh, okay, I'll tell him later. You're not working today, right? Why don't you come back earlier to keep your dad company?" "No, I'll come back with Evan in the evening." Sophia instinctively refused. Going home early would mean listening to their nagging, which she didn't want. Mrs. Lancaster didn't say much. Just reminded her of a few things. After hanging up, Sophia regretted what she had said earlier. They had just had a fight this morning, and she didn't know if Evan would be willing to go back with her. Now, she had no choice but to bite the bullet and find him. After taking the emergency pill, Sophia hailed a cab and gave the driver the hospital's address. Evan is a cardiac surgeon at the F hospital, reputed to be very popular there. Upon arriving at the hospital, she called Evan, but no one answered, so she had to go to his office to find him. In the elevator, two young nurses were chatting. "Another patient has requested Dr. Hunter to be their surgeon today." "Oh, when will I ever get to enter the operating room with Dr. Hunter?" "Give it up. You two won't end up together. Just because it won't happen doesn't mean I can't dream about it. It's like you don't have a thing for Dr. Hunter. So what if I do? Didn't you see how Charlotte clings to Dr. Hunter like glue? I bet they'll end up married. Who doesn't think so?" The elevator doors opened, and the two nurses walked out, while the elevator continued upward. Sophia felt much heavier than when she had arrived. She had always known that Evan hadn't publicized their marriage, but his apprentice, Charlotte, was aware. However, from their conversation, it was clear that Charlotte knew Evan was married but still stuck to him. She and Evan had married through a blind date. They discovered they were classmates and both single, so they got married in a rush, much to their parents' delight. What their parents didn't know was that they had been high school classmates, sitting in front and behind each other. If they had liked each other, they wouldn't have ended up in a blind date marriage. After getting married, they lived a courteous life. She slept in the master bedroom. He in the guest bedroom. Except for intimate gestures in front of their parents, they didn't even hold hands in private. In front of their elders, they were a loving couple. At home, they were strangers living together. As she was thinking, the elevator doors opened again. She stepped out and headed to Evan's office. The door was closed, and no one was inside. After a moment's thought, she opened the door and went in. About half an hour later, she heard footsteps outside. "Evan, how about having dinner together after work today, to make up for yesterday?" It was a clear, playful female voice. Sophia pressed her lips together, her face showing some displeasure. Logic told her she should wait here without losing her temper, but in the end, impulse won out. Even if they were going to divorce eventually, they hadn't divorced yet, had they? Since they hadn't, she wouldn't allow anyone to challenge her.